Happy Hump Day. Welcome back, Meenal. Meenal is the girl that's helping me out because she loves this podcast so much, don't you, Meenal?
Yes, that must be the reason.
Meenal had some spare time on her hand, and this is why. Sure. Okay, so I think we should go straight into stories. I haven't really got anything exciting to share. To think of anything else I've been doing. Not really.
No.
What was that?
Bought some Aboriginal art.
You bought some Aboriginal art?
Yes. Which I've been looking for a long time. And I went to black market for that, it wasn't, there were only really two people selling art there. I bought a little one, which I liked, but I wanted a bigger one for the wall. And so on the way back, I was driving home when I had the bigger one, and I stopped by the gallery there's a Kate Owen gallery and I'm not plugging, sorry, I didn't get a gallery. Yeah, and I was driving by and I stopped by that gallery and I found something that I really liked. So it is now hung up on my wall. It's beautiful. Love it.
Oh, yeah, cool. Can't wait to see it. What was the motivation behind buying it?
To be honest, I think it was when we were having brunch in QVB and we happened to be up on really level or the second top, whatever it is. There's a gallery right there. And I remember walking past it and going, oh, this stuff is really nice. And I really want something for that wall. But that gallery is so expensive. And I couldn't obviously really find anything in there that I could afford it. Well, yeah. And so I've been on the lookout for a few months now for stuff like that. Because I was like, oh, look nice, I think.
Nice.
And I find it to be beautiful. So,
all right. Awesome. That's lovely. Buying art for your home.
Yeah. And it was the one I ended up buying. I was looking for a female artist. But the one I ended up falling in love with was a male artist. So I was like, oh. But anyway.
Oh, well.
Oh, well.
Oh, well. Just as talented. Can't deny his talents.
True.
What you're drawn to.
Exactly. Anyway, it's beautiful.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We didn't talk, well, don't we know? We had it was like a month ago now. Our Christmas in July.
Yes.
That was fun.
That was fun. And we did a curry-themed one. And your curry was amazing.
Thank you. Curry-themed Christmas in July. Christmas in July is very Australian.
Mm.
And I don't know, maybe Europeans invented it because the idea is it's only cold in July and it's too hot in the winter in Australia to feel like it's actually Christmas for the, which is Northern Hemisphere cold climate thing.
Yes.
So hence we have halfway through the year, we have like when it's supposedly the coldest time, a Christmas that feels like a European Christmas or a Northern Hemisphere Christmas. Yeah. So Christmas in July was curry, which is very suited to the cold weather.
Yes. There's just something. Well, obviously, I eat a lot of curry, so there's just something about eating curry I like.
Yeah, I love it.
So many people are talented in cooking curry.
Well, I was trying to make a Jamaican curry, West Indian recipe, but it's not easy to find the Jamaican spices here. So I had to try to put it together from scratch, and it was okay though. It was definitely nice, but it didn't taste how I remember. So when I go home next, I'm going to have to bring some spices back.
Yes.
The Jamaican spice.
I don't know how this is. My friend cooked very good curry.
Good.
He made, I've been having a bit of mixed curry recently, but he made this chicken curry, which is like a South Indian thing that I've never tasted before. And it was so good. And he was like, I need to have this because it tastes so good. He was like, no, I've run out. I have to go back to India to order it. And I'm like, surely not. Surely we can get it here. But apparently not.
Well, this is the thing. It's like spices and the blends of the spices. It's the same with Nigerian. There's a Nigerian dish and it's called a Nigerian stew that my dad cooks. And you can get individually probably get spices, but it's the blend of spices and how they blend them together. So when he goes to Nigeria, they bring it all back then, the spice blends, to make food. Otherwise, it doesn't taste the same.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, and you know, our friend from South Africa, she does that. She brings spices back from South Africa.
Yeah, Mum's the same. Every time she goes to Fiji, she will buy more spices. And then she's very particular about the brand of spices that she buys here because it doesn't taste the same. So
yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? So there you go. There's a market for it. Okay, so stories today. I have this story which is interesting in the sense that I never considered China as a. I never considered China as a racist country, and that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
I just never thought China. I don't know. I think both ways. Firstly, I never imagined Black people living in China. I only imagine Chinese people living in China. I've never been to China myself, so I wouldn't know for sure. Even if I wouldn't even imagine like Japanese living in China or any other South Asian ethnicity living in China. I feel like China is just for Chinese people. Now, that could be just a huge error. I don't know. But there's a story in the ABC News about Human Rights Watch calls on Beijing to remove racist content from Chinese internet. And as we know in China, we know it's very highly censored. They're generally not allowed any Western platforms. They don't have access to things like Google, WhatsApp, Instagram. None of that's available to China, but they do have their own versions of these things. And even those versions are censored in the sense that anything remotely political or talks about their government is generally removed.
Yeah.
They're very, very strong on that. And a new report from Human Rights Watch finds racist content on the Chinese internet targeting Black people has become common. Has become quite common, which I thought, wow, okay, is that a thing? Especially if there's no Black people there. So how's that a thing? But then even more interesting, how are they perceiving Black people when there's not as many or very many that live there? So what happened was Emily Du, who's a Chinese citizen, has married an African man. And it's not clear if they live in China, but I suspect they do. And her family in China were not happy, but that was nothing compared with the racist attacks that were posted online. So the beginning of her relationship, her family was really against her relationship with their African partner. And after years of marriage, the family has become more relaxed. And online, where China's intense censorship regime rapidly moves unwanted political content, is a different story. Miss Du and her husband Eric, who is from Benin in West Africa, have been sharing their family life on social media for nearly 2 years. I think it sounds like Miss Du is the one that runs the social media accounts, and she gets internet trolls. And she mentions that in May of this year, so May 2023, there was an internet trend called the anti-Black wave on all major social media platforms. And it's called Zahongshu, which is a Chinese social media platform. So their comment section was bombarded with abusive attacks from strangers for days, Miss Ju told the ABC. So this social media platform is being likened to Instagram. Says the abuse was not only directed at me and my family, but also at some people who supported us and spoke up for us on social media. And the couple had quite a few supporters, but they also became used to negative comments. And she says she felt shocked. She says at that time, when such a large-scale abusive attack suddenly broke out, I felt so shocked. And the pair have been married for 6 years. They have 3 children. And they spoke to him, but Eric seems reluctant to speak to this journalist. He's just said that he didn't have the Chinese social media accounts. They weren't his. So he wasn't as aware of the online racism. And he did say that the cyber violence we are subject to and the stares we get from our surroundings stems from more prejudice and misconceptions about specific races. I don't think they are racist. Most of them are just curious. I don't know about that.
Yeah. So it seems you live in China if he's talking about yes as well.
Yeah, I would say so. I think they must live in China.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess what is the perception Chinese people have of Black people or African people? This is very telling, isn't it? And he goes on to say, this is Eric, they look at me with a mindset that was given to them by other people. And even if there was any racism around me, I didn't see it because I don't live in their bubbles. They live in my own bubble. This is what he's saying. Miss Dew said in China, interracial marriage, especially Chinese and African marriages, were very rare. She said the racism they have encountered online has recently lessened. And the diversity of social media personalities has increased. And at the same time, the general public has become more tolerant of different types of people and content, she said. I don't really like that word tolerant. Suggests there's something to tolerate, but I get why she's saying that. Miss Dew and her husband were not the only ones to suffer this kind of abuse on China's major social media platforms. Experiences with racist and offensive posts are rife across the country's most used social media, according to a new report by Human Rights Watch. And then the story goes on to give some examples. It's really bad. There's one here, like you get in the magazines, cartoons.
Yeah.
And during COVID, there's one here showing, those like people in hazmat suits, and there's bins, like rubbish bins or biological waste and garbage bins. And we've got a picture there's a Black person in the bin disposing of foreign garbage. That's one of the examples. And then there's other videos, they've like done the blackface thing. So an actor. It's just to me, this is like stuff that used to happen years and years ago in the likes of the UK, Australia. Blackface, showing African people in grass skirts, and just the perception. But it's quite funny. It's not funny. It's terrible. But I'm just thinking, my stereotype, everybody has stereotypes, right? My stereotype of Australia was literally kangaroos jumping around, koalas and desert. Because I didn't see much representation of Australia in the media. I don't know where I got the kangaroos from. Maybe there was some kangaroo TV show. I don't know. And then the whole Crocodile Dundee. So that was my entire education of Australia. And that, as inaccurate as they were, generalizing as they weren't necessarily harmful or perpetuating anything negative. You come to Australia, you see it's nothing like that. And, all is good with the world. When you start to perpetuate, people in Africa, like not wearing clothing, just as people that are, I don't know, uncivilized or criminals or whatever. To me, it's crazy. Or as people that can't fend for themselves, and this is this idea that they're victims, and I guess all that kind of UNICEF and some of the charities, Ethiopian drought and starvation, and yes, those things absolutely happen. But Africa's quite a big country, and Black people outside of Africa, I just think it's a stereotype that's perpetuated. It's very harmful.
Yes.
Anyway.
Hopefully part of the growing pains, as like they get more exposure to different people who aren't Chinese, Same thing for, Australia, when lots of migration happens, lots of racism happens. And then hopefully people then assimilate a little bit more, not assimilate, that's the wrong word, but interact a lot more with people who they're not used to. And then it becomes less and less, hopefully. This feeling that they're foreign and they're threatening or something. And so they just, assume the worst.
But there's so many things. Apparently in the 2022, a BBC documentary revealed videos of African children being instructed to repeat demeaning phrases in Mandarin that was being sold on Chinese social media. And Chinese social media, they blocked searches of videos containing the term Africa, which blocked everything to do with, even educational stuff.
Mhm.
And then there was another incident on China Central Television which talks about a skit where a Chinese government's investment in Africa featured a Chinese actress in blackface reciting lines like, "China has done so much for Africa and I love Chinese people. I love China." That kind of thing. Oh,
That
so
sounds
funny.
ridiculous, but yeah.
It does sound ridiculous, but they don't see it as racist. That's what's also ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they obviously have a political, economical relationship with African countries that serves them as well. I think they should be really careful.
Yeah.
I guess that generally speaking, Black people, Africans aren't going to know what's happening in China.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what's going on without stories like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not surprising. It's not a surprising story.
No.
It is and it isn't. It's like, on the one hand, it's like, oh, this day and age kind of thing. But then on the other hand, it's China and they're very cut off culturally from the West, the big evil West.
Yeah.
But I just find it interesting that they have such a perception of Black people as being whatever their judgments are.
I'm very completely different. No, I've seen so much social media content between Indians and Koreans, because the Indians are obsessed with the Koreans and the Koreans seem to be, quite obsessed with the Indians as well, like cinema and, music and clothes and stuff. And I've seen so many more relationships and marriages and things between Indians and Koreans. I was like, oh, this is not something I would have expected. It seems so strange because everybody's a little bit obsessed with Korean pop and Korean, drama and things like that in general. But those two in particular seemed interesting because there's videos of girls dancing to Bollywood music and things like that. So I'm like, oh, it's pretty cool.
So are you saying because of the fascination with Korean pop culture, the Indians are so fascinated with it and vice versa, that there's more interracial relationships and mixing of the culture?
Yeah. And from people in India who contacted, being connected to people in Korea and then dating and things like that, married and stuff like that. And tourism, that normally wouldn't happen. So many more people are going over and vice versa. And they're like, oh, love it. So, this social media stuff can be very helpful in exposing people to things that normally, they wouldn't think of. So,
yeah, I guess it's everything. There's good and bad with everything. Hey,
yeah, I think so.
I always say that can be used for good, can be used for bad.
Yeah,
some people are so anti-social media because of the bad things, and I was like, you're right. I mean, and there needs to be some controls and regulations for sure, but it can be used for so much good as well, not just bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the effect of boarding people to, other cultures and things like that. I think
yeah, I like that as well. Exposing people to other cultures so people don't seem so different, because people really aren't so different.
No, exactly.
Fundamentally.
Yeah. So, I have seen it where it's like these guys rock up someone's house as a response to their social media comment, where they're like, oh, I could punch harder than I don't know, some guy abusing it. I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny. I like that. That your comments have consequences, Like, so that would be, I think that needs to go out a lot more. Like, people are just like, people would say things on social media that they would never say in person,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that as well. I think if you wouldn't say it in person, you shouldn't be putting it on social media.
Yeah.
But they do, because they feel like there's some sort of some barrier protection.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. Especially when they're anonymous, they don't have, they don't have it linked to, their actual.
I just think you shouldn't be allowed to do anonymous posting, although I have seen contexts where it's appropriate. And it was where a woman was talking about her daughter needing some support and help, and obviously wanted to ask for help without revealing the identity of her child. And if she'd revealed her own identity, then it would be obvious.
Yeah.
So I get those kind of this context where that's important.
Yeah.
But maybe then there's certain places where that's possible, but not everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely. That makes sense. Like on random people's Instagram, you shouldn't, or whatever the platform, you shouldn't be able to put an anonymous comment in and stuff like that. Yeah, it makes sense. Most people are not being going to write something positive, generally speaking. But yes. Interesting. All right. So I have a news story from ABC News, and the title reads, Louise Taylor becomes Australia's first female Indigenous Supreme Court Judge. So now I'm going to try not to butcher this. The Kamilaroi woman, Louise Taylor, has become the first Indigenous female Supreme Court judge in Australia. Justice Taylor was appointed to the ACT Supreme Court today as the territory's sixth judge. She has made history for a second time after she was appointed ACT's first Indigenous magistrate in 2018. So good for her. And she has described the court as an engine room of the justice system. And she said, I'm hopeful it has put me in an excellent position to deal with the workload in the Supreme Court. For my part, it will be business as usual, being a judicial officer, just in a different place with a broader jurisdiction. She says that she feels very honoured and privileged to serve her community. And this is, of course, a very proud day for her family and her, but she hopes that it's also a very proud day for First Nations people, in particular First Nations women. At my appointment, I'm conscious of the significance of it, and I'm very proud to accept this appointment. During this announcement, ACT Attorney General Shane Rattenbury said the government was pleased to be able to appoint a local judge who she hoped would inspire others to follow in her footsteps. Ms. Taylor is, of course, the first Aboriginal woman to be appointed. We're very delighted that as a Kalimanaro woman, she has not only had the outstanding legal career, but she also represents Aboriginal people and will be a role model for young lawyers coming through to understand how far they can progress with their careers and hopefully provide a source of inspiration. And just a side note, last year, Queensland appointed its first ever Indigenous Supreme Court judge, Warramunga Lincoln Crowley. Justice Taylor appointed, it's interesting. Justice Taylor appointment marks an expansion in the ACT Supreme Court bench to six judges after a restructure removed the associate judge position. And Chief Justice Lucy McCollum, has strengthened her court because it's a very strong court with diversity, lots of local experience, some experience from New South Wales lawyers who have been appellant advocates, and we have a very strong mix, I should say.
That's a really good story. I mean, great. I didn't realize that. So if I heard correctly, this is the first female First Nations woman to take justice. What do you call it? Just
to be in the Supreme Court.
In the Supreme Court, but they've got a title.
Yeah.
Like, is the title just justice? Justice, yeah, their
Justice
name.
Taylor, yeah.
Okay, yeah, got it. And then, but there has been a First Nations man. I guess he would be the first then in Queensland, as far as First Nations go. But this is the first First Nations woman, which is amazing, and incredible. Even that there's a First Nations man was incredible.
Yes.
Oh, Queensland. So that's quite amazing.
Yeah. It's kind of, well, for me, I think it's positive news, especially on account of vote that's coming, I think, towards the end of the year. For Australians, for the voice. So I think the more, exposure you have to positive news stories is great.
Yeah, with First Nations, yeah. That's another interesting thing that's dividing the country. I don't know why. I don't know if it's always what they call false news.
Yeah.
Why it's so contentious, other than you really not wanting to recognise Aboriginal people in the Constitution. I don't see why it's such a contentious problem.
I don't know. I saw on social media some person saying,
"Can't hear you, Meenal."
It was just a member of parliament, I think, just talking about how she knew of some Aboriginal mother of 6 or something and just living in poverty, and why weren't people dealing with that? And she named a few Aboriginal leaders who she said had lots of money. And I was just like, what does that have to do with the vote? So I think as normal, like with all of these kinds of changes that people will try and put through, they're like dividing the issue. Like, it's not about all of that. It's not, that might have a fair discussion at some other point. But this is about just recognizing Aboriginal people in the Constitution. That has nothing to do with what she was talking about. So that's, it's not helpful, really, her education, her position and stuff. But,
yeah, I guess people just have to justify their position. Honestly, in some cases, I feel that people just want to be opposed because it gives them attention.
Yeah.
I honestly feel that that's some people. I think some people may have genuine objections.
Yeah.
Whether I agree with those or not, it's another matter. But I feel like a lot of the people are just jumping on the opposition bandwagon to make some noise and be seen.
Yeah.
That's sort of the perception I'm getting with some of this stuff. It's like, what? How? It's very disheartening when it's supposedly well-informed people. People that you would expect to be well-informed anyway. Yeah. So, okay. Well, great story though. First Justice Taylor, the first Indigenous woman to become part of the Supreme Court. And I guess each state and territory has its own Supreme Court, obviously.
I didn't know that. Yes, I guess, but
I didn't know that, so you shared the story.
Things you learn.
Oh my God. So this podcast is quite educational. Well, for us anyway.
Yeah. Definitely for me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that story, Meenal. It's very interesting. Good to see we're progressing in some instances anyway.
Yes. Sometimes most people at a snail's pace, but
snail's pace. That's right. All right. Well, that's all we had time for. And I did lose some power as we were recording at the end there. That's all good. Anyway, we'll speak to you next week. So enjoy. Bye.